We are supporting our friends and neighbors in the crosshairs of President Trump through a crisis that we did not create.
Mark Carney's victory in Canada, is it a big moment for the centrist dads of the world, Camilla?
A walk back into wokery, just what we need. And what does the fall of the Conservatives in Canada mean for Kemi Badenoch and the Trump factor? How is Carney going to repair that unique, special relationship? Mark, welcome to the Daily Tea. We shall bring you into this conversation very, very shortly. Was it Trump what lost it, Kamal? What do you think?
Seems to be, because if you look back at the polls between the Liberals, which are quite similar to the Labour Party here in the UK, and the Conservatives, quite similar to the Conservatives here in the UK, the gap in the polls was 27%. And all during the election, Donald Trump was doubling down on this idea that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States. And of course, there's been a huge row about tariffs between those two countries. 80% of Canada's trade is with America. It's like sort of Wales versus the rest of the UK. And unlike Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, the leader of the Liberals in Canada, went, I think it's a hockey term, an ice hockey term, this Canada, elbows up, or is it elbows out?
Elbows up.
Elbows up, which means you go kind of a bit hard at the edges. You put your kind of elbows up and you jab them in the ribs. So he's gone for a very different style of attack on Trump than, let's say, Keir Starmer. He said that there is no way that Canada will ever be the 51st state of the United States, that Trump is completely wrong. And that has brought out the Liberals in a way that has meant the Conservatives, who also got a surge in the polls, couldn't manage to defeat. I think, just finally, it feels a lot like the 2020 presidential election in America. Donald Trump got the highest ever presidential vote, apart from one person, Joe Biden, in the same election. And Pierre Poilievre did very well. It's just that Mark Carney did better.
Mark, can we do a bit of pie chart politics of Canada here? So how many Canadians would be Trump fans, do you reckon, as a proportion of population?
Trump fans and fans of his idea of annexing Canada are two separate things, I hope.
Okay.
And I would also correct the metaphor. I don't think we'd want to be Wales to the rest of the UK. We'll be Ireland. We're a separate country.
Yeah,
well, Wales is a separate country here.
An independent state.
Independent state, yes. Good point. And Mark Carney's oddly a UK citizen and an Irish citizen, as well as Canadian.
And he had to renounce, I think, yes. I understand he was renouncing those passports.
Yeah,
don't know if he's done that. So in terms of the pie chart politics, how many Canadians support Donald Trump? Before his re-election, my wife's from central Canada. When I would go home, go to the sort of the prairies, a lot of people they genuinely liked the man.
Yeah.
He genuinely offended many of those supporters by suggesting that Canada just had to, sort of fold over and become a second state. And as you've both referenced, absolutely cratered Pierre Poilievre's once bulletproof chances of becoming the next prime minister.
But Poilievre was anti-Trump in reaction to the 51st state comment. It wasn't as if he fell in line. He absolutely called Trump out. So what surprises me is, what have we seen then? A load of previous righties saying, just because of the Trump factor, I'm going to go left. Or am I being oversimplistic?
No, and first I should give Mr. Poilievre credit. His concession speech this morning, both very early in the morning Canadian time, a more acceptable hour here, was very good. He could have been bitter, and he did. And he also said, we are going to continue to fight for Canada against Trump's tariffs. And he made it very clear that anyone was trying to put him in that box, it was unfair. Two things happened. One was that for a lot of disenfranchised Liberal voters who were parking themselves with the Conservatives, they're just tired of Justin Trudeau, thought that Mr. Poilievre, for reasons that he can't really control, looked too much like and sounded too much like Donald Trump. And he has sort of flirted a bit with the trucker protests and all that sort of thing. And the absolute cratering of the left-wing party, the real left-wing party in Canada, the New Democratic Party, which fell from, it lost its party status last night. It dropped 20 points in the polls from where it was a few months ago.
Are these people further left than the Liberals?
Yes, the Liberals are considered centre-left. The Conservatives are centre-right, or were centre-right. They've kind of become more of a unite the right movement over the last couple of decades. which is interesting for the conversation here as well. But the left wing, the proper left wing party, and a lot of the separatist Bloc Québécois in Quebec both sort of said, you know what, we're scared of what's happening in the South. In the United States, and we're going to park our vote with this guy, Mark Carney, who sounds like he knows how to handle a crisis.
Right. Got it.
Camilla, I would love to ask you about, are there lessons here for Keir Starmer or worries for Keir Starmer? You've spoken about Poilievre's acceptance speech, but let's just hear what Mark Carney said after he had won the election.
As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. But we also must recognize the reality that our world has fundamentally changed. There is also, for me, as I stand before you this evening, humility in recognizing that, well, many have chosen to place your trust in me, trust in the Liberal Party. Millions of our fellow citizens preferred a different outcome. And my message to every Canadian is this: no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
He gave that speech, then he put on a red jumper. Why did it have a 24 on it, Mark? What are we missing here? Is this from last year or something? Mark Carney's red jumper.
You've got me on that one.
Oh, no, it's the 20... I know this, chaps. He's the 24th Prime Minister of Canada.
And if you did do that, it's very American, actually, to start numbering yourself.
Yeah, but that was pre-prepared, so that looks a bit arrogant, doesn't it? But anyway,
and then
he dad dances, doesn't he? And I must admit, it is some of the most excruciating political footage I've seen, I think, since the Maybot.
I felt a little bit of post-traumatic stress disorder, possibly of a similar age to Mark Carney, and that idea of dad dancing and really not getting it right. At some points, he actually looked like he was trying to do the Thriller flick of the hands on each side. Now, Camilla, I just wonder what your thoughts were. Mark Carney clearly made an effort to distance himself from Justin Trudeau, who was incredibly unpopular in Canada, sort of seen as the king of woke. Carney got rid of some DEI members of the cabinet. He reversed many taxes, particularly one of the carbon taxes. But do you think, Camilla, that it's just convenient and actually this is going to come back via the back door? And is there any read across to Keir Starmer?
Well, it's just completely disingenuous, isn't it? I mean, this bloke has been in Justin Trudeau's ear for years. We know his record at the Bank of England. Lots of righties still haven't forgiven him for massive amounts of quantitative easing, haven't forgiven him for his arch Romania. He was supposed to be impartial as the governor. He wasn't. And he's very much associated, well, A, with progressive thinking and a degree of left-wingism, but also associated with a kind of close relationship with the Osborne and Cameron type of Tory that many people, myself included, would consider to be rather wet. Okay, so let's just put that in that box. This is exactly the same as Keir Starmer suddenly deciding that he does understand what a biological woman is, having been the proponent for trans women are women politics literally in recent years. So this whole revisionism that's going on purely for political expediency, because everyone, as you said, Mark, has had it up to here with Trudeau. He believes what Trudeau believes, right?
I don't know if we know what he believes yet. I mean, he's come in and he's been sort of careful to be this centrist sort of dad character. And that's sort of what I think won him the election. And who he'll be will, to a certain extent, depend on things we don't know yet. Like, is this a majority government or does he have to govern as a minority? In which case, he's going to have a potentially different looking cabinet. If he's going to have to include members of the aforementioned left-wing NDP, that would give us a different look to this cabinet. And what he does with these sort of Trudeau stalwarts, I mean, if I was advising him, I would say, you need to look completely different. That's what you've told people you are. If you bring back, to name three characters, Mélanie Joly, our current foreign minister, François-Philippe Champagne, our current finance minister, or Chrystia Freeland, who was sort of the real consigliarity of the Trudeau government and who actually toppled him at the end of it all. But you wouldn't, if you put those three faces forward, very quickly Canadians will say, this isn't what we were promised. This is the same government again.
Right.
And yet he owes all three of them in different ways politically. It'll be very, both Mr. Champagne and Madame Joly could have run against him. They wouldn't have beaten him, but they eased his path to power. And I'm sure there's deals that were cut before that all happened. Same with Chrystia Freeland. I mean, one of the underreported facts of they were the two sort of competitors for Liberal leadership. One of her children, Mark Carney, is the godfather of. I mean, they're not very. They know each other very well. The top of the Liberal Party of Canada, and it'd be very difficult for him to really renew that party, which has been in power for 10 years. So it will most likely look a lot like the Trudeau government. Although, if I was advising him, I'd say, tack away. People did not vote for more of the same. They voted for a different kind of change than what Mr. Poilievre was offering.
Kamal, you know Mark Carney relatively well. I mean, you've
Yeah,
done quite a
I
lot
was-
of stories with him. What's he
Absolutely.
actually like?
I mean, I was economics editor when he was governor of the Bank of England. As you say, the Conservatives saw him as a real Remainer. Jacob Rees-Mogg's famous quote, the high priest of Project Fear. He is, if you can just think of the diametric opposite to Donald Trump and Nigel Farage, it's Mark Carney. He's Harvard, Oxford, ex-Goldman Sachs, very at home in Davos. He is the man of the metropolitan liberal elite. He then did work once he'd stopped being the governor with the UN. I first interviewed him, or one of my early interviews with him was way back in 2015 when he first connected the climate crisis to finance. And I remember challenging him in this interview and saying, what has the climate issue got to do with the governor of the Bank of England? So even at that stage, and this was obviously before the referendum controversy, he was leaning into areas that could be seen as political and controversial. He was described when he was Bank of England governor as the unreliable boyfriend, remember, because
Yes.
his signalling on interest rates did not seem to be clear to the markets. But I think, Mark, to your point, I think it's unclear quite what type of progressive, I so hate that word, leader he wants to be, because he has been energetic in his campaigning at trying to distance himself from Trudeau. But as you say, Mark, can he pull himself away from the tractor beam of the Liberal Party? And I'm just wondering, Mark, in Canada, has there been this reaction against diversity, equity and inclusion policies, wokery, etc., that there has been in the United Kingdom, similar in America, in the United States? I just wondered what the tone is in Canada, which we've always viewed, haven't we, Camilla, as a very different country, obviously, from the US.
And if Mr. Poilievre had won last night, and as you say, he had, except for I think Brian Mulroney in 1988, the best share of the popular vote for the Conservatives ever. If that had been enough to carry him to victory today, I'd be saying yes, that's his proof that Canadians were tired of. DEI. I don't hear that term used much in Canada, but there was an exhaustion with.
Pro-immigration as well.
Mr. Trudeau's, what Canadians call virtue signaling.
Yes.
And the word wokeism, and particularly this idea that we had to apologize for our history. And I think Canadians got very tired of, Justin Trudeau was excellent at sort of emoting and conveying this feeling that, Canada did things wrong in the past and we're going to do things. But he did it so often in so many different circumstances that my home riding is just outside Ottawa. It's actually where Mr. Poilievre just a few minutes ago lost his seat.
Yes.
And my wife, as I said, is from central Canada. So these are ridings that I spend time in when I'm home. And I know in those two places, the word Trudeau just would make people sort of shake with anger. And it was about that, this feeling like we used to be proud of being Canadian. And suddenly we're supposed to apologize for it, and they weren't even sure why. They didn't feel like they'd done something wrong. So I think it wasn't so much DEI as this feeling of why can't we be proud of our country anymore? That really undermined.
What happens with Mr. Poilievre now? He's lost his seat. Does he have to stand down as Conservative leader? Or?
That is so. He gave a speech last night, this morning, in which he made it clear he intended to stay on. It's now a lot more unclear that he can, because there were already going to be forces that were going to say, "You just blew a 27-point lead." Despite all the good things that you can point to in the campaign. And that would be asking him, there would have been a leadership review, at least quietly anyways. Now that he's lost his parliamentary seat, he either has to try and lead the caucus from outside Parliament, very difficult to do for 4 years, or ask someone who's just won their seat to step aside so that he can run in that spot. Either way, I think we're leaning a little bit closer to there being a leadership challenge. We'll see how it plays out
Who's
still.
the most likely person to challenge him on the right?
I was thinking of that on the way over here, and this gets a little bit to the question of what the Canadian Conservative Party is. So the Conservative Party of Canada has already gone through this sort of unite the right moment. There was the Reform Party, which Nigel Farage models his party on the Canadian Reform Party. And it sort of did a reverse takeover of what was the Canadian Tories. And so Mr. Poilievre really comes from that Reform Party side of things. And that, if you're looking at the results of last night, the question of did we lose too many centrist voters because of our Reform Party roots? Or, look, we've got our second best result in history. Let's just lean into this. There will be people on both sides of that. There will be folks who say, we have lost the center and we've got to lean back into the center. And there'll be others who are saying, just keep going. This is the future of right-wing politics or conservative politics in Canada. Most of the people that come to mind have good jobs right now. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, probably don't want to leave their jobs. Jason Kenney was the first last night. He's a former cabinet minister and a former Premier of Alberta, and he was the first to say, we don't need a leadership challenge right now, which is often a sign that you're the first person thinking about it.
No one wants to be leader. I mean, it's so funny how politics around the world
so similar, isn't it? Just hearing that, Mark. You could have been talking about Kemi, couldn't you?
Kemi Baydock is close to
she went over to see him when she travelled over to Washington. She then travelled to Canada. It's always been made clear by her officials that Poilievre was one of the people that she saw as a kind of North Star for the future of the right. Not sort of aggressively Trumpian, but certainly smaller state, winding back the state, much, much lower immigration, lower taxes. My only thought on that is, given that the Conservatives still did well, okay, not over the line, and of course lost, and that's bad for any political party, clearly, that she can remain on that trajectory. I think the public is looking for a party leader, whether that's Conservative or Reform, who is all about disruption and reform on taxes, immigration, climate change policies, and DEI, wokery, whatever you might describe it. And I think as long as Kemi keeps on that line, I don't think what's happened in Canada, and there may be some people in the party that may suggest this, should put her off.
I was just going to ask a concluding question just about Carney and Trump now, because obviously this is quite strong rhetoric that he's come out with, in victory. But we can't really have a situation where the US president and the Canadian prime minister don't have a very good, close working relationship, right, Mark?
It would be very difficult for Canada to win a prolonged trade war. If this escalates, I think we will be, we're already very concerned about. I was in Montreal over the weekend, and the amount of the booing of the American national anthem, the lusty singing of the bilingual Canadian version, which is sung in hockey games in Montreal. I bought a toque for my wife that just said it has a Canadian flag and not for sale. And I mean, this mood is fantastic and wonderful. And we're feeling, a quietly patriotic country sort of becoming a loudly patriotic one. But it's not, where's this heading? We don't want a conflict with the United States. It doesn't go well for us. I assume Mr. Carney is betting that talking tough is the language that Mr. Trump understands, that Mr. Trump, as long as this is confined to a debate about the shape of the next trade agreement, with the understanding that Mr. Trump tore up the one that you've just negotiated with Justin Trudeau, so was it worth? Then, this is the language. But you really also have to be careful of the escalation. We don't want this relationship to get worse. We cannot suddenly sell everything to Brussels or Beijing. Our economy, we have internal trade barriers that are so restrictive that it's much easier to sell things south of the border than it is to sell between provinces. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of fixing to be done, and he has signaled he's going to try and go for an internal Canadian free trade agreement, which sounds absurdly strange to anybody outside of Canada, but that's the first thing he has to accomplish. But we cannot afford a bad relationship with the United States, but we also cannot afford to be treated the way that Mr. Trump has treated us in the last couple of months.
Carney's certainly a massive fan of what's called the rules-based order, so he's all about the World Trade Organization. It'll be interesting to see what role he plays in the G7. I think probably quite helpful to Starmer and other members in Europe. He's very much backing Ukraine, backing the position that Europe and Starmer have taken on Ukraine. He's no friend of Putin. And I suppose in that sense, he will be somebody who, we know that a lot of our audience, Camilla, find Trump's attitude to Ukraine and Putin to be on the wrong side of, of the argument. And if Carney is smart and plays that card right on the world stage, he could be helpful to, I think you said, didn't you, Mark, as we were chatting just before the podcast started recording, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, has sent a message of congratulations to Carney. So that could be interesting.
Mark McKinnon, thank you very much indeed. I know you've got lots of writing to do, so we better let you go, but thanks for joining us on the Daily Tea.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks very, very much.
Thank you.